Here's an example of literature circle jobs and activities that go along with the book night. So when you are first creating literature circles, you want to kind of decide how you want to organize it. So this teacher did a Google slide for her example. And you will then need to decide, is the whole class reading the same book, or is different groups in your class reading different books? So once you have that kind of decided, you are ready to go. Then slide 3, these are different rules that are part of this literature circle for this book. So you can kind of see all of the different jobs here. And then underneath it is just a quick description that you will want to go over with your students. And then your students will choose a job role for their literature circle group. So the first job is the discussion director. And this person is going to fill out everybody's kind of role. They're going to make sure that no job is doubled up. They're going to mediate any conflicts that might take place during the literature circle. They're going to also remind members of their jobs and any deadlines that are coming up. And then they are going to also make sure that there's no dead conversations. They have to ensure that there's questions and that everybody in the group is talking and answering those questions. So to help this role right here, students are going to use the QAR, which is question answer relationship. They are going to kind of sort through these 4 different types of areas. Anytime it says click here, this is kind of an extra resource for students to use if they need it. So while students are reading before, during, and after, they are going to want to think about different questions. And so they might have the right there type questions, the think and search type questions. They might use on my own type questions, and then the author and me. And so based on those 4 categories, this slide kind of goes through them. The students will come up with those different questions right here, and they will add them right on. And if they click here, it takes them to another resource that talks about that QAR questions to help boost that reading comprehension. So again, it provides examples, sentence stems for the students on each of those 4 different types. And so again, the students are going to come up with those 4 questions right here. And then on the next slide, students will come up with backup questions. So this is if students are needing additional questions, they'll have them ready to go. So if they click here, it has an additional 51 different questions that students could kind of ask. We want to remind students that they can't be yes or no type of answers. They need to spark that discussion within the literature circle group. The next job is the concept connector. This student's job is to create a hexagonal puzzle for their team to sort through. So they are going to be searching for different words that will help them think critically and make those connections and think about key events that have happened in that section of the book. They are also going to think about words that they can add right there. And then we provided the students an example so they could see an example and how these are connected. So then they had to write about the connection that was made between those different words on the hexagonal puzzle. So again, students are going to decide what words they want to use, and they're going to type those on those hexagons. And then as a group, they're going to work together and make those different connections, use the arrows. But then on the next slide, slide 10, they need to make those connections. So again, they're going to say why those different connections are placed together and explain why they maybe put something where they did. And then the podcast producer. So this person is going to create an episode about their reading section. And so they are going to then create different clips that have the hook, the intro, the main body, the takeaways, and then the outro. And this student is going to then create their podcast using WeVideos, what we told our students. However, you could use Flipgrid or you could use something else. And then they had to come up with that catchy title. They had to come up with different events that might have occurred during those sections. They had to come up with an intro and outro for their episode. And they had to use some type of creative format, whether that was an interview, a guest speaker, or maybe they were a solo host. And they had to follow that outline. And then they had to make sure that their podcast was at least 2 minutes and didn't go over 5 minutes. So once they were done, they added their podcast link right here, and we just reminded them to ensure that the access was correct. And then the fourth job is the game host. So the game host worked to create a game based on their reading section. And what they had to do is they were able to start a Google Doc, and they typed all their questions into that Google Doc. They color-coded their correct answer, and then they pasted that Google Doc onto to create their game. So they might have copied and pasted, or they may have made it out of paper. So they could choose any of these different games. They could make their own game, which is this freestyle. And there's another, I believe, video that walks through students how to use this, where they have to maybe have points or shapes or cones or any of those kind of things. And then they could use cards, dice, spinners, and make up their own rules for their game. Or they could have created an already kind of created game from using one of these Slides Mania templates, or one of these gamified websites where they could log in and develop their own game. You can kind of see down here are just some tools that students could also use if they needed to, like spinners or dice or anything like that. And then they were able to talk about where their reading questions, their link to that, and then the link for the game. And then for the next slide is that literacy luminaire. So this person maybe picked 5 different passages from the book, and they had to discuss it with the group. So that could have been paragraphs, sentences, or phrases. And their purpose was to kind of figure out those passages and talk about those different parts of the text. So they kind of worked together with their group. And on the next slide, they had a couple different options to create. So they could have created a Padlet, they could have done a wee video, a Prezi, or a Google slide. So again, students had multiple different options of how they wanted to display those passages. And then they just included their reasons for picking them, and they had to cite anything that they did with that passage as well. Number 6 is that travel tracer. So this one was kind of fun. They often had some type of character in the book that maybe traveled to different locations. And if they didn't, maybe the person was tracking the character's actions instead. So students had a choice between Google Earth, Prezi, Google Slides, or Canva. And there were a couple different templates linked here. And what the students did is they either used like Google Earth to create their project to show the movement of that character through the different locations or throughout their life, or they could have used some type of like Google slide where they also added like, here's the date, or here's the event, and here's the order that it took place. The next one was number 5, the Signpost Seeker. This person had to find signposts within the story, and then they had to help their members develop that deeper understanding as well. So right here, they had to find at least one in each signpost, and then they had to work together with their group to kind of explain it and explain it to them. And then they had to decide a format that they were going to do it as well. So again, they could have used Padlet, WeVideo, Prezi, or Google Slides for their signposts to kind of explain those. Words to the wiser. So this was another one. This person had to choose maybe the author's craft, and their job was to be on the lookout of like any new vocabulary words. So right here is a nice fair model, and then the students would come up with the word, the definition, the sentence, a GIF or an image, and then context clues. So that was that kind of job role for that person, was for the words to the wiser. And then they had to select 5 of those different words from that passage, and then they had to make a slide for each one of those. So you can see right here is where they were able to get their copy. They had to find 5 different ones to add to their deck, and then they had to create using that fair model. The creative curator, this person kind of thought was like that museum person, and thinking about how they might collect, categorize, and display maybe arts and artifacts. So they were kind of thinking like a museum person. And what they had to do is they had to create or curate different things about that person or that family. And right here, you can kind of see an example. Again, trying to provide students different examples of different things. And these students had choices as well on how they could curate their information. So again, there's some inspiration for them. And then again, they picked that person or that family to honor. They read about that person and gathered their artifacts. They picked a room of their choice, and then they kind of create like a museum for that person. You can kind of see here, you're able to add voice over, and then here's those little images as well. And then they explained what those artifacts meant in that museum. And then the Artful Artist. So this person was visualizing the text, and they were kind of making sure that they were looking at kind of those inferences that they might be reading, and you can make a deeper connection by the text. And so what they were doing is they could pick any of these options: blackout poems, shape poems, a trailer, book canvas, mind maps, or the book bentos. And so once they chose, they added their final product to this slide for the teacher to grade. So again, that was kind of the organization of this lit circle with some just examples of how it was used. And I can't wait to see how you change some of those job descriptions or use this in your own classroom.